Welcome to the B Block Podcast. I am your host, Brandon Scott. I appreciate you for joining me, and we are going to have a good time here reacting to the college football semifinals, the college football playoff semifinals, and it is picked up. I know the beginning of the college football playoff was a little bit of a chore and a little bit of a bore. A lot of people were trying to figure out, like, does this make sense that we got all of these 12 teams and we don't feel like it's 12 teams that can actually win a national championship? To which I answer no. And I do find it interesting that we get this far into the game. We got 12 teams in the playoffs. We get down to the final four. And even going into that Notre Dame Penn State game on Thursday night, the feeling was everybody is playing for an opportunity to lose to Ohio State, whether that's Penn State, whether that's Notre Dame, who it turned out to be, or even Texas in this game coming up on Friday night at the Cotton Bowl. Everybody was, for the most part, competing for a chance to lose to Ohio State, who I feel like we have all, or most of us at least, have crowned as the eventual national champions. And I gotta say, that does feel a lot like every other college football season that I can remember, or just about every other college football season that I can remember. And that's just the reality of it, right? Like, for me, I'm entertained by these games. I'm glad that we've got the extended playoff and everything. But every year, it feels like there's somewhere between 1 to 2, maybe at the most 3 to 4 teams that can realistically win the national championship. And would you look at this? Nobody believes that anybody other than Ohio State is primed and positioned to win this game. Now, you could argue that you needed these games to play out because you didn't necessarily feel that way back when Ohio State was losing to Michigan. And I would say that that's a fair point. That's why you play the games. That's why the season is the length that it is. But yeah, man, that's kind of where I'm at going into this second semifinal game, where I'm obviously rooting for Texas. I'm a Texas fan, and I would love nothing more than to be wrong about this. And you look up and it's Texas and Notre Dame, still two blue bloods, but you got the one that you think is the most dangerous out of there. And I got to say, after watching Notre Dame last night, that I would feel pretty good about Texas's chances if they were to get past Ohio State. I'd feel pretty good about them being able to beat a Notre Dame team that, while I'm glad that they won, because I don't want to make any mistake about this, I was rooting for Notre Dame in this game. I am not a Notre Dame fan by any stretch of the imagination. But I'll tell you what my exact motivation was going into this game. My exact motivation was rooting against James Franklin and Brian Kelly. As much as I like Marcus Freeman, and I'll talk about him in just a second here on the podcast, but I was going into this game just wanting James Franklin to lose and for Brian Kelly to have even more egg on his face than he already did before this game even started. Just the fact that Notre Dame was in this position, I think, is somewhat of an indictment on Brian Kelly and how he viewed that job and how he exited that job and went to LSU. But that's what this was about for me, man. Rooting against James Franklin, who has always rubbed me the wrong way. And I hate to make these types of things personal. I don't know James Franklin personally, but the way he presents outwardly and publicly has always rubbed me the wrong way. And then on top of that, he's a coach with this heightened level of arrogance, despite the fact that he can't seem to win a big game to save his life, or certainly to save the life of his own team. And that was a very a very interesting part about this game, was rooting against James Franklin, but watching and feeling like, early on in the game, that James Franklin not only was doing a decent job of coaching the team, but had the better team. That he had the better team. Let me just explain this real quick with the Brian Kelly thing. Okay, rooting against Brian Kelly because he's the one that said that he had to leave. No, he wanted to be at a place where he felt like he could compete for a national championship. And that's why he left Notre Dame for LSU. Then he gets to LSU pretending to have a Southern accent or what he thought was a Louisiana accent or whatever that was. All of that made me feel like he was somewhat of a disingenuous person. And that's after we're talking about his departure from Cincinnati well over a decade ago when he got to Notre Dame. Y'all, if y'all are old enough to remember that, that in and of itself was drama. So whenever he leaves, kind of leaves with a little bit of a stink on him from wherever he leaves, and then going out of the door here, he's going to LSU because he wants a chance to win a national championship like he wasn't just at Notre Dame. I'm fine with a guy feeling like he's reached a ceiling at a place or wanting to move on or feeling like he's not growing anymore. But the fact that Kelly gave off, hey, I'm better than Notre Dame. I'm too good for Notre Dame. For Notre Dame, I'm gonna go to LSU and achieve my dreams. It did not sit right with me, even as somebody who does not, in and of himself, root for Notre Dame. So I was rooting for Brian Kelly, or rooting against Brian, rooting for Marcus Freeman against Brian Kelly. Check that off the box. And then James Franklin. I was able to let James Franklin make it. I was, even to some degree happy about the two black coaches going head to head and one of them being the first one to compete for a national championship. I'm into that story. I'll get to that in a second as well. But I really didn't want it to be James Franklin. Can I just say that now? That I was really, really, really hoping that it would be Marcus Freeman. And I didn't want it to be James Franklin. And it felt like it was going to be him in the first half of this game. It felt like he had the better team. It felt like I didn't think either coach was doing a poor job. I thought both coaches did a decent job, but it felt like Penn State had the better team. And I was going to have to watch James Franklin in this national championship game. And I just got to tell you, man, I cannot unsee James Franklin. And this is going to sound like a very benign issue to most, but it bothered the hell out of me. And I can't unsee it. And I want to say he's even apologized for it and acknowledged that it wasn't the best way to handle this thing. But y'all remember earlier in the year where there was an allegation of some type of sexual misconduct or assault or something to that effect. I didn't even really get into the actual story that the journalists and reporters were asking James Franklin about at this press conference a couple of months back. But he goes up there and reads a statement, all right, which is cool. You got a statement, you got a party line, you got something that you got to say, and you can't say no more, and you don't want to say no less. You just want to say what the statement is on there or what's on the statement. Goes up there, reads the statement, and the journalists, as they have to do, ask some follow-up questions. They doubt that they're expecting to actually get answers to their follow-up questions, but they ask them anyway because that's part of their job and everybody knows it. And James Franklin looks over to the media guy. You know what? I don't even think James Franklin is the one who read the statement. I think it was the media relations guy who read the statement. He looks over to the media guy and waves him over, and points, says, come back. And it doesn't say anything actually. It just says, waves him over and points like he's the help. Like that guy is not a coworker. Like that guy is not in some ways, his peer. And I'm just like, man, James Frank. I saw this posted. Someone posted this on Twitter during the game. James Franklin looks like the guy who's definitely rude to waiters. He's got a Karen kind of energy about him. And I just, man, ever since that moment a couple of years ago, I was like, man, I want them to lose. Nothing against the players. It ain't got nothing to do with that horrible scandal that they had from over a decade ago, which I feel like a lot of people still hold against them as well. Man, it ain't had nothing to do with that. It was like, man, is this how this dude treats people and how he views people? Where he just becks them over and points. Imagine that. Imagine I'm supposed to be your coworker, and I'm addressing you, and instead of talking to you, calling you by your name or articulating whatever it is that I'm trying to say, I just go. Man, I've been rooting against James Franklin ever since I wanted him to lose this game so damn bad. The first black coach to be in the national championship story be damned. Get him up out of there. I was ready for this. And look, I thought that Notre Dame was gonna win going into the game, and by halftime, I was convinced that they would not because it seemed like that Notre Dame was getting pushed around in this game. I thought Notre Dame was getting pushed around in this game, and Penn State, if we're just being real about it, they looked like the better team, and they certainly looked like the more physical team early on. And they carried the 10-3 lead in the halftime. It was really 10-0. They got that field goal there late at the end of the half, but nobody felt like Notre Dame really threatened them. I want to say it was Kirk Herbstreit, maybe even on the halftime show, saying that it didn't feel like Notre Dame had a weapon that really scared that Penn State defense. And let's give some respect to Penn State and Notre Dame's defenses. Both of them, I think, were very key reasons of why this game was such a good one. Like I think the Texas Arizona State game on New Year's Day was the best game of the college football playoffs so far of this year so far, and it's going to probably go down as one of the better ones that we've had of the college football playoffs. And I don't think there's a close second, but I think this one clearly is. It's not a close second, but it is clearly second. It is clearly the second best game. This one between Notre Dame and Penn State. And again, early on, it felt like Penn State was the more physical team. And I thought that they should have won the game. I thought they were going to win the game based off of how it was playing out as we watched it. But the cool thing about Notre Dame is that and I don't know if cool is the word that I'm going for, but it has been interesting to kind of watch this play out and watch Notre Dame in the college football playoff. They don't they don't going back to this conversation about them not having a weapon that could scare the Penn State defense. For as good of a defense as that, great of a defense as Notre Dame has, and as great of an overall team and outfit as they seem to be, like their offense has to be one of the worst that we've seen overall. It's got to be one of the worst or least talented that we've seen at this level for a team that is playing at this level that is now, as we know, going to compete for a national championship. Like they've got to be one of the more, or I would say one of the least impressive offensive teams that you'll find at this level playing in a national championship game. And I know they played for a national championship game before and weren't necessarily didn't turn out to be as talented as as they would have liked to have been. But this one like just somehow finds a way. I was saying this last night watching the game, like, man, their offense just goes through these stretches where it looks hopeless. It looks like they don't really have anything other than, they run the ball fairly well, but like their passing game gets extremely stagnant and they just struggle to move the ball. They just don't feel like they've got a lot of firepower. And then you look up, bam, big play. Bam, there it is. Explosive play. And you're like, where in the hell exactly did this explosive play come from? When I've been watching them the whole game or watching the last however many minutes it is, and they don't seem to have anything. It is remarkable how Notre Dame seems to overcome its own shortcomings on the offensive side of the ball. And this is the I'll go ahead and get to this point about Marcus Freeman because I don't want to spend too much of your time, and I also have some things that I got to get to. Appreciate y'all joining me on the B Block podcast. But Marcus Freeman, the head coach for Notre Dame, is doing like I don't want to oversell the idea of doing the most with less when it's Notre Dame and you've got Notre Dame talent and Notre Dame resources. I don't know what the hell Brian Kelly was talking about other than maybe the academic the academic constraints that they actually have some academic standards at Notre Dame that may be hard, make it a little bit more difficult to recruit there. But Marcus Freeman's figured it out. like in terms of getting the right collection of players and being able to push the right buttons in game or within the week's preparation. Like the dude seems wildly prepared and competent as a head coach. And again, is making the most out of what doesn't necessarily seem to be a lot of offensive talent. I talk about coaches whenever I talk about coaches. I mention, is this somebody that can just take what's given to them, or are they a maximizer? Do they take the talent that they get and not just get what's expected, but get even more out of it than what is expected? Can they maximize? And Marcus Freeman, I've thought this all along, but certainly after watching this Notre Dame offense muck its way to a national championship appearance, Marcus Freeman is a maximizer as a head coach. I absolutely think that Marcus Freeman deserves NFL consideration. If I was one of these teams that was looking for an NFL head coach, I would at the very least want to talk to Marcus Freeman, contact Marcus Freeman just to hear him out. I would want to get a sense for what his vision for a program, for a team would be. Now, obviously, there are some questions about what his offense would look like, who would his coaches be, who would his offensive coordinator be. He is not, while he is a young, up and coming, and I would say not even up and coming now, a young coach who has arrived at just barely 39, 38, 39 years old or whatever he is, like he would not be considered like one of these offensive gurus that I think a lot of the NFL is looking for, what the trend seems to be in the NFL. But you want to talk about a leader of men, somebody who can establish culture, somebody who players respect and want to play for. And again, a maximizer, somebody that gets the most out of their talent. Marcus Freeman would be high on my list if I was somebody in the NFL looking for a head coach. I would want to contact this guy. And I absolutely think this guy deserves NFL consideration. I can't wait to see what the future holds for him, regardless of exactly how this national championship game plays out. Really excited for him. Now, uh, on this game, we do have to talk about this. We do have to talk about this because it is um, I think an unavoidable element of this game, and that's Drew Aller. Drew Aller and the conversation around Drew Aller in this game, I think, got a little bit out of hand, and it's not that young man's fault. It is not that young man's fault that we, when I say we, I'm talking about the media that covers football, decided that we wanted to talk about him in the context of an NFL quarterback, and he can go. He can enter the draft. He's played 3 years, been in there 3 years, and he's draft eligible. You know, he can go. He can play. But there was some talk about, hey, he's a better prospect than Cam Ward or Shador Sanders. And it's like, where did you see that on tape? I'm talking about even before this game, before he had the interception, the costly interception at the game that helped Notre Dame convert on that game-winning field goal, or either of those two interceptions that should have been interceptions that were not because of penalties. Like, where even before today did you say that dude? Not that he's not an NFL prospect. I think he probably is. I mean, he's 6'5", and looks the part. And I do think that whether he goes this year or next year, he is somebody that will be draftable. But they're talking about Cam Ward and Shador Sanders as first round picks. Like Shador could be picked number one overall. He could be picked in the top 10. Him and Cam Ward could be picked in the top 10. Now there's some discrepancy on whether people think they actually should be. Are they actually that level of talent, or they just the best quarterbacks in a bad quarterback draft with teams that are going to be desperate to try to find quarterbacks? Fair question. But Aller, Drew Aller ain't nobody's first round quarterback in no context, in no year, on no level of desperation. Not right now. Maybe I'm saying something different next year, this time next year when he comes back, if and when he comes back and gets this bad taste out of his mouth and plays a little bit better. But like I did not watch, okay, and this is not a disrespect to these guys because it was a fun game. All right, it was a fun game, fun, entertaining game, and like I said, it was the second best and second most entertaining game of the playoffs. But I did not watch either one of these teams. Okay, I didn't watch on either side of the ball or watch either one of these teams when they went on offense and felt like, you know what, I'm watching an NFL quarterback. I didn't see it. I didn't I just I didn't see that at all. Like whether it was Drew Aller for Penn State or Riley Leonard for Notre Dame. And Riley Leonard I got a lot of respect for. I think he's a gamer. I think he's got a lot of heart. I didn't see a quarterback out there that made me feel like, you know what, this is a guy that I want to build an NFL team around. That's the future right there. Now there were NFL players all over the field, right? You know, like there were guys like Abdul Carter. I thought was a dominant force and is going to be picked high, like top 5 probably. I thought he was a force throughout the entire game for Penn State on a bum with just like one arm, with a bum shoulder, right? Jeremiah Love, the running back for Notre Dame, who had probably the biggest or one of the better highlights of the game. And I want to say he even hurdled the guy despite saying that he wouldn't. Had some of the best like film and moments of the game. Is probably somebody that is going to be in the NFL. The secondary for Notre Dame. The defensive players on this team, on both of these teams, are, and the running backs are guys that you can look at and say, obviously Penn State's got the best tight end in the game and the best tight end in college football. You can look around this game and find NFL players, guys that are going to be playing on Sundays and be playing on Sundays for a long time. Drew Aller, either of the quarter, Drew Aller, Riley Leonard, they were far, 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 far down the list of guys that are like that I was going to view like that. So, I mean, it was very awkward. My man Greg McElroy is singing the praises of Drew going into that final drive right before he throws the interception, talking about how careful the guy is with the ball and this is a quote, said he would empower him. Said, man, I would empower him. This guy is good, makes good decisions, good with the ball. I would empower him. And they did. And boy, it did not work out, I think, the way and there were a couple of moments on this broadcast that were kind of rough. Okay. And then I'm not trying to take out Greg McElroy. I know it's a hard job, but the Drew Aller glazing right before he ends up throwing the interception, like does the exact thing that you are kind of arguing that he doesn't do, which to be fair, he does seem or has seemed in the past risk averse. And that was an uncharacteristic type of mistake from Drew Aller. I will acknowledge that. It's not that Greg McElroy pulled that out of his hat. It's just that the timing of it was very, very funny and just, ironic, I would say. Um, so you had that, and then they're arguing at the end of the game that uh, that Notre Dame shouldn't score a touchdown or they should like avoid. Basically, the argument was to avoid giving the ball back to Penn State so they couldn't come back and win the game. And I'm just trying to figure out what game they were watching. I understand it was, final score 27-24. There were points scored. There were some plays made. But what about those quarterbacks or those offenses that they were watching last night made them feel like, man, if I give them the ball back with sub 30 seconds, they can go down there and score. Not a field goal, because they were saying don't score a touchdown. You score a touchdown at that point, we're talking about less than 50, it was less than 40 seconds, maybe less than 30 seconds at that point, 30 or 40 seconds at that point. There was not a quarterback on that field. There was not a quarterback on a team last night that could have engineered a 30-second. I don't think I don't think there was one that could have engineered a 30-second touchdown drive. I would say that person did not exist. So that was a rough claim. Like, man, you score a touchdown, man, this is all but over. You know how hard the touchdowns have been to come by? Like, absent of some kind of freak accident type of play, type of bust. Like one of the touchdowns that Notre Dame scored was that where you had two guys slip, one slip before the catch and one slip after the catch on the move, and they scored. Like, I don't know what it would have taken for that to actually happen. But a touchdown would have won the game. All they needed was a field goal. But it was just weird. It was odd analysis there at the end on what I thought was overall a pretty good broadcast team. And yeah, very, very, very much enjoyed it. And then enjoyed laughing there at the end. Now, before I get out of here, and look, we got this Texas Ohio State game Friday night. I'm all here for it, and we'll come back and we'll discuss it once it happens. Spoiler alert, I'm picking Ohio State, even though I'm a Texas fan. I'm picking Ohio State just like the rest of the world is, based on the way that Texas has struggled to close out games or to play complete games, might be a better way to put it, and just how dominant Ohio State seems. And the way that, there was nowhere for Dylan Gabriel to go with the football when they played Oregon last week. Like, just how that secondary has shut down really good teams, and how they've just switched. It seems like they've turned the switch ever since that loss to Michigan. And they do have the makings of a national championship team to me, and the best player in Jeremiah Smith. So the freshman wide receiver, I think that Ohio State is positioned to win this game, and so I'm picking them to win this game. We'll come back and see how that prediction goes. Look, and I'll tell you this: if my prediction is wrong, you will see a happy man. You will see a happy man, because that means that Texas is in the national championship game and they're going up against a Notre Dame team that I have gained a certain level of respect for. But one thing that did not happen in this game, and I was curious if it would, is if either Penn State or Notre Dame, whoever won, to end up being Notre Dame, if they would play well enough to make me feel like they could beat Ohio State, or would they play well enough for me to feel like they could beat a team in Texas that just beat Ohio State? Like, could they win convincing enough, or play a style or at a level that was convincing enough for me to pick them or think that they had a chance against Ohio State or a team like Texas that could possibly beat Ohio State? I don't think that's the case. Ohio State, I'm picking to win this game. I'm picking them to win the national championship. And if Texas wins tonight, I'd be hard pressed to believe that Notre Dame is going to be able to beat Texas, but we'll see. I want to get to this though before we get out of here. The first black coach in the national championship game. Why it matters. I saw some of the usual suspects that were upset about ESPN for highlighting this and for asking, and which is dumb, right? Like, if this is an actual fact, they would be negligent to not highlight it, to not talk about it, right? Like, they absolutely have to talk about it. But the subsequent commentary can be, oh, this is the pitfalls of identity politics, wanting to talk about a thing that doesn't matter, and coaches who clearly themselves don't want to talk about it being the first, because one of these guys was going to be there, right? James Franklin or Marcus Freeman. It's going to be Marcus Freeman. But why it matters, I'll say this: it's always a shame when you see people are more triggered or upset by that mere mention or conversation or the question of how does it feel to be this or that, they are more upset about that than the simple fact of the matter. Like, why is it? And I really want to focus on this because we say the first black this, the first black that, and then we celebrate the moment and say how cool it is. Like, man, this is the first black person to do this. Man, isn't that cool? But the more years that go by, the further in time that we get, the worse of a story that is, the more of a shame that that is, especially in this game of football, where a good portion of the players out there, a good portion of the talent out there is black. It is an odd thing. Just think about it like this. They've been crowning national champions in college football since 1869. They've been doing the college football playoff for how long now? About a decade now? Has it been a decade? Since 2014. All of these years of college football being a part of the American tapestry. And it's 2025. 2025. And the first black coach who's a mixed race, the first black coach is going to a national championship in 2025. And not only that, not only is it just now happening in 2025, but it ain't some old geezer out here, some black coach that's dyed in the wool and has been around since the civil rights movement. This is a dude born in the 80s. I want y'all to think about that, the significance of that. Okay. The first black coach to go to a national championship wouldn't even, not only did it not happen till 2020 till 2025, but dude wasn't even born till the 80s. You think about that. Just want you to just let that sit with you for a while. The significance of that math right there. Born in the 80s, the first black. That just goes to show you how long it's been, how much time it took. Let me ask you this. Do you think Marcus Freeman is the first black man that is qualified to take a football team to the national championship? Do you think he is the first black coach that could have pulled this off? Marcus Freeman himself will tell you no. Everybody with some sense that's around my age, around Marcus Freeman age, know that we stand on the shoulders of others that came before, right? He ain't the first black coach that could have coached a team to the national championship, man. The first one you think was born in the 80s? No, that's not how it works, but that is how the game is played. All right. So look, you can dismiss it all you want, but that math, that simple fact, you are either blind or crazy or being intentionally silly to not acknowledge the weight of that. And maybe it's hurtful to reflect on what that might mean and what that might say about college football or what that might say about America, but it ain't nothing that you didn't already know. It ain't nothing that you didn't already know. And this reeks of, there is a segment of people that do not like this sort of history highlighted in this way, and they actually know uh, the part of it, the nefarious nature of it, and it is their agenda to deflect from the nefarious nature of these things. And so let's not talk about it. Let's not have identity politics. Let's pretend like the first black coach to coach in the national championship being born in the 80s. Never mind the fact that that probably should have happened by then, that he was born in the 80s. No big deal. Anybody can do this. But can they though? Can they though? Shout out to Marcus Freeman, man. I do hope that he gets the attention and the looks and considerations that he deserves for some type of promotion, if that's in his heart, if he does want to leave Notre Dame for the NFL. But this moment in time is significant, and I won't let any of the bad actors downplay the significance of it. We'll be back to talk about Texas and Ohio State, how things go at the Cotton Bowl. Who will Notre Dame be facing in the national championship game? That will be next on the B Block podcast. Make sure that you are subscribed, that you are rating, reviewing the podcast. Tell your friends about it. That helps grow the program. And until next time, y'all be good.